Today on Locked On Rockies, I got a text from a Rockies super fan, a hesitant one at that. Maybe I should put that disclaimer on there saying maybe we should be giving Bill Schmidt a little more credit.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the third day of August in the year 2023. I am your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So if your team is the Colorado Rockies, guess what? You're in the right spot because that's what we do around here is talk about the Colorado Rockies each and every single day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. You can find us free and streaming on your favorite streaming service. You can also find us on SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app. Just search Colorado Rockies or Locked On Rockies. When you search Colorado Rockies, you're going to be able to get that play-by-play action of your beloved Rocks, and you can find us as well on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. Today on the show, we're going to talk about an interesting text message I received from a big reason, a guy from from a family that's a big reason why I'm a Rockies fan today. And we've talked about him on the show before. Got to give a shout out to our guy Jam Brown again. He sends me tons of ideas, so sent me a pretty interesting text message here, and we're going to dive into that because it's addressing and assessing Bill Schmidt and giving him maybe a little bit more credit than we have in the past. We'll also talk a little bit about what's ahead for the Rockies, and Brenton Doyle's defense is getting some love as well and continues to be a factor into why he's getting a lot of high praise, and that's a good sign. Of course, like we've said over and over with him, is the bat. That's one thing. But the potential for Brenton Doyle is something I think that Rockies fans can get more and more excited about because that defense is so important. We'll talk about that coming up here as well. Before we dive into everything today, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. This episode of Locked On Rockies brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. Okay. So I got this text message the other day, and from Jambron, my guy. If you all have heard me talk about him on the show before, and he said, "I think you should do." Unfortunately, I wasn't able to bring him on. Maybe we'll bring him on for a follow up here if I can set it up. But he wanted me to cover this. He wants to defend the entire Bill Schmidt era from Gray and Story to this deadline. And he follows it up by saying, Gray wanted to stay, but we lowballed him. Story, the comp pick is better than what they were offered at the deadline. This deadline was good. Is Bill 3 for 3 on major moves? I don't necessarily. My thing with these comments and his thoughts here, I don't think we get to let him skate on Jon Gray especially. I hold it deep down that the Rockies should have been more active in negotiations, should have been more willing to at least match what the Rangers offered, and should have actually demonstrated more of a commitment because it set up another trend. And it was one trend that also could have started, which was keeping legitimate pitching here. And this season especially, and I would say we saw it last year at times as well, but it's highlighted especially this year. And there would have been issues with Gray and his tendency to land on the IL as well with this. So a little bit of a grain of salt. But the Rockies need Jon Gray right now. And I would say as things are progressing, as these careers are advancing, I don't know if it's necessarily the rain. You can have an argument to say that Jon Gray would be flirting for number one spot in the Rockies rotation. I mean, Jon Gray has unfortunately had the blister issues and I think got hit in the arm with like off the bat. I mean, he has bad freak health issues sometimes, but he's also good. He's also solid, and he's also really helping a Rangers team. So I'm not. I will sit here and say that is actually one of Schmidt's shortcomings. I think losing John Gray has proven to be a bigger issue and a bigger deal for the Rockies than anticipated at the time. And looking at it, especially when you're looking at the fact of the bad health luck that the Rockies had with starters this year, on top of performances that are a little, John Gray was really good for the Rockies, and John Gray would be still really good for the Rockies. So I can't say that, but I'm curious. I know he's going to listen to the show, and I'm sure he'll follow up with this. The Trevor Story stuff is interesting because I've heard that a couple of times now that the one draft pick who I believe Drew Kreisman, I think, said is the number 9 prospect overall for the Rockies. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I think this is where I show a little bit maybe of my ignorance and kind of the fan side of we think we can know the calls of GMs and know the inner workings of it. And it's like, it's Trevor Story. Like, Trevor Story at the deadline is worth more than a one draft pick. I mean, I've been saying it over and over in time, over and over again, but was it? I mean, with me just being a guy in a room yelling about the Rockies, like, how much necessarily can I don't have an inside source. I don't have someone in there. It's just very hard for me to believe that Trevor Story, that overall this compensatory draft pick was the best option, because the one thing we all knew, trade or no trade, the Trevor Story era was ending. That writing was on the wall after the Arenado trade, and especially I believe Gray signed pretty. Not that, I mean, I can't remember actually when John Gray signed, so never mind there. But we all knew the Story era was over. So when I'm looking at it and when I'm thinking about it, especially when you go back to that trade deadline being the by committee GM and not actually officially Bill Schmidt's tenure, even though he was the interim GM and should have just been named the GM and actually been able to just start doing things. That's when maybe we have to start doing that. And it's, when you're looking now at the health issues that Story has faced and things like that, that maybe that was the best option. Maybe teams really legit, were more worried about Story, and especially looking at how it's panned off or panned out so far. So maybe I think we need. I do think maybe I need to reassess that as I continue to see some stuff and maybe try to talk to a little more people. That's one that I guess maybe we have to reevaluate. It seems like such a miss, right? It seems like a huge. It seems like if it was this year, if it was 2023, Bill Schmidt in that situation, Story would have gotten dealt. But also, is that a sign of growth for Bill Schmidt from the Trevor Story incident to this trade deadline? Was being a part of the committee or whatever was actually going on with the Rockies front office during that trade deadline and during that season, did that kind of give him an idea and set him up to be a little bit more aggressive at the trade deadline, especially this year and especially compared to the inactivities last year? I mean, I think when we're looking at Bill Schmidt's tenure, when we're looking at the successes, it does seem like he's taking steps forward. I mean, the Rockies have made good moves off of the waiver wires and grabbing people that teams let go, like Brent Suter, for example, picking up Brad Hand and then flipping Brad Hand, Pierce Johnson as well. Same with Moustakas. I mean, those are guys that, they were just, the Rockies were able to pick up and flip. And then, you were able to get, when you look at it, like, did the Rockies win or lose the Tapia trade? Like, I mean, it's not really a way to look at it, but Tapia was struggling to find, a team for a bit, and Grichuk never spent any time on the waiver wires or anything like that, and has shown flashes of pretty good success. So when I'm looking at Bill Schmidt's tenure, some of the things are still glaring in issues, but I think we do have to start saying that we have to acknowledge, at least right now and at the deadline, there was a change. And that's a good thing. But how much are we going to buy into that? How much is it enough to convince us that the Rockies are in the right spot and in the right mindset moving forward? I don't know. But it does show us one thing that we haven't seen at least the past couple of seasons and to start Schmidt's tenure. We'll talk about that coming up here in segment number 2. But before we do that, it's an off night for the Rocks. So why don't you look around the league and pick a few players, and what do you think? Maybe give yourself a reason to watch more baseball players and more teams with Sleeper, because with Sleeper, you can build your slip with players and various stats, hits, home runs, strikeouts, put them all together. And if you win, if you hit on Ohtani hitting over on the home runs, or let's see, I'm trying to think of, Braves home runs. Pick any Braves player and do the home run total. Maybe you want to put a couple of Braves players on that slip and hit the home run totals, hit the home run overs. You can do that and more at Sleeper. So with Sleeper and our promo right now, you can get an 100 times payout. All you have to do is choose 2 or more players that you like and select more on the categories like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right, and you can win big. Use the promo code LOCKEDON and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We're free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, and thank you for checking us out on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. Y'all have been incredible this season, and I appreciate it greatly. Like I said, still working on that giveaway. It's coming, I promise. But wanted to dive in. I think this is a little bit more. I think we got to talk a little bit more about Schmidt. I think we got to dive a little bit more into the fact that the Rockies had an identity at the trade deadline this year. The Rockies assessed a problem and are able to kind of form and look and say, hey, position player wise, what you're going to see for the rest of 2023 are these guys. We know that. And on top of that, they loaded up the farm system and hopefully with pitching prospects. Whether they pan out or not, that's all down the line. Versus the past trade deadlines that I've covered on the show and what we've seen in the Rockies in the past of late, complete inactivity. If Bill Schmidt is willing to sell on seasons like this more often, that will signal a shift with the Rockies. It will. If Bill Schmidt is more willing to get rid of veterans on expiring contracts and flip them to rebuild and retool, I think Bill Schmidt said this is what he's going to do, is load up the farm system. I watched a short from DNVR Sport Rockies there. Our guy Patrick Lyons, one of the best guys in the Rockies biz, kind of highlighting and explaining that as well. The Rockies forming an identity. So when we're evaluating Schmidt's tenure as it's going now into technically year 2, but really year 3, I interim GM, that year was weird. But now you can feel a little bit more confident that the Rockies will engage and do this. Now, the amount of veterans on expiring contracts that you have on your team completely, that's not the case anymore, especially with what the Rockies are looking at. I mean, you're not going to be able to move, honestly, a few of these veterans that you have, at least position players wise. I mean, in terms of, really depends. I don't know. I mean, how can you now go to what does the 2024 trade deadline look like? You know what I mean? Does that mean do we have more questions surrounding Rodgers and McMahon? Are those things that we're going to have to start wondering about? Are the Rockies really high on those guys? Is Chris Bryant ever going to be a factor for any of these things? The Rockies got a lot younger in this trade deadline. So it will be really interesting to see, because these moves in this deadline aren't going to help make the Rockies a contender in 24. In reality, 2024 is going to be another tough year, more often than not. But he himself, and this was from Drew Kreisman here, Rockies GM Bill Schmidt emphasized the importance of clearing up playing time for the young players for the last 2 months. He also agreed he was hyper-focused on pitching, and he's pleased with the 7 arms they required. Plan, bam, you know what I mean? Identity. Hey, for the rest of this year, we're going all in on our young guys, and we rebuilt the farm system. You haven't been able to say that about the Rockies. That is at least a sign of the identity and maybe the philosophy to come, because it could be maybe not aging veterans on expiring contracts, but utility players that you don't know what to do with. Harold Castro, Alan Trejo, for example, or, you know, it was just so when we're asking the question, does Bill Schmidt deserve a little more credit? I don't think it's that crazy to say yes, but you have to acknowledge it with the grain of salt that there are some big misses, and it certainly started on the wrong foot. Plain and simple, the biggest issue I have right now with the moves that Schmidt has made, the Chris Bryant contract was a mistake, an absolute mistake. I mean, unless Chris Bryant really turns it around and can produce 4 seasons of contributing ball, then you can give him some credit. But the Chris Bryant, the biggest misstep of the Schmidt era has been Chris Bryant. Easy. I mean, I think you can point at the trade deadlines, you can point at Story, you can point at Gray, but simply put, it's certainly one of the moves to try to start things off on the right foot for Bill Schmidt. But it's going to be one that sticks out. And does it set a bad precedent for Schmidt giving contracts to other players? I don't know. I'm happy KB got his money. He's done the thing, but in terms of value for that contract that the Rockies are getting so far, it's a tremendous overpay and tremendous overlook by the Rockies, especially when other teams were probably a little bit more hesitant than the Rockies to sign Chris Bryant. So, but time still left on that contract. But who knows? Who knows how the health issues of Chris Bryant are one thing, and that's something you can't necessarily really knock Schmidt for outside of the evaluation side. So, we'll see how that pans out. But maybe, like I said, a little bit more props for Schmidt is needed. Let's see if I missed anything from my guy Jambron here. I don't think I did. So I disagree with my buddy Jambron that Schmidt is batting 1,000 with his moves right now. But my brother's not so confident. The only teams with worse records than Colorado are the A's and the Royals. We will see in a year or two, but it's climbing Everest at the moment. Certainly does feel that way, but you feel like the Rockies took 2 steps forward instead of 2 steps back when it comes to getting back on track and managing and handling the trade deadline and retooling the farm. Is it all going to pan out? We'll have to see, but it's at least encouraging. All right. Before we get into our what's ahead for the Rockies, got to give our props to Brenton Doyle, who was just named the co-defensive player of the month here. And it is really impressive to watch him play defense. And it's, again, something that the Rockies are much it's so refreshing to see refreshing is not the right word. I'm sorry. I was getting lost in the details of this. It's cool. It's exciting. It's a way of. It seems like part of one of the biggest banes of the Coors Field issues has been solved, at least temporary for now, and it's amazing how much of an impact and how good defensively Brenton Doyle has been this year. So here he has, he led all center fielders with 6 runs saved in July. His 8 defensive runs saved on this, his 8 DRS on the season are tied for third among all center fielders. And this is a rookie playing in one of the most difficult outfields to cover. It's awesome. I mean, and it's generating some love too. I saw Spilly tweet out that he hasn't seen someone cover center field this well since Dexter Fowler, and it is. That's high praise. I mean, Dexter Fowler, an underappreciated Rocky. We talked a little bit about Dexter Fowler at some point, but that's something to watch. Again, when you're looking for is Brenton Doyle. You saw it on display. I mean, it changes things when you have defensive threats and you get those small things. You're able to get those small plays, and those runs saved matter. I mean, that's how you end you end an early rally. You get a critical third out. And it's just, I'm so pumped on Rockies defense, really. I think the ceiling for the Rockies defense, at least in certain areas, is really strong. It's a bummer that it kind of dips in other areas, but to have center field covered by a young guy that has shown a bunch of excellence in exceeding in playing defense and a very tough outfield and cores is a great sign for the Rockies. And it's great that he's being recognized for it there by what was it, Fielding Bible there? Yep, Fielding Bible and Sports Info Solutions. So again, Brenton Doyle named the co-defensive player of the month. 6 runs saved in July, 8 DRS on the season, tied for third among all center fielders. Pretty neat. Good for him. One day, you just got to get that bat going, and he will be a force to be reckoned with. I really do think that if he can swing a decent bat, that's a great blueprint for center field, especially if with the speed as well. Doyle has been fun, and it's really fun watching the next possible crop of Rockies. Other than that's the reason to keep watching this year, is to see Doyle play a great center field and Tovar catch basket catches in deep center, and those are the things to enjoy and focus on for the Rockies here the rest of the season. And all right, let's look ahead for the Roccos as they got more baseball to be played, not this day, but the next day and over the weekend, as it's a little bit of an NL Central road trip for the Rockies. Is a long road trip and a tough one here. As I want to set the stage here in this final segment with this tweet here from Manny Randawa here. It is, to avoid 100 losses this season, the Rockies need to go 21-33. All right. Anyway, let's check out the finale here. Like we said, the Rockies, to avoid 100 losses this season, the Rockies got to go 21-33. The next 3 series for the Rockies takes them to St. Louis, to Milwaukee, to LA. After that, the Rockies will return home for a homestand, but the Diamondbacks are a part of that. So looking ahead for the Rockies, again, I'm not intimidated by the Cardinals this year, especially this is a new look Cardinals team that has traded away some of their pitching and things of that nature. It's the road Rockies, though, right? I mean, these are the Brewers obviously are going to be looking for a big series here against Colorado. Teams are going to continue to circle Colorado here on the list, but how successful should we expect the Roccos to be? I don't know. It hasn't necessarily been great for the Rockies of late here. In the last 2 series losses at home against the Athletics and the Padres, the Rockies haven't won a series since the Marlins series, and that was 3 series ago. The Rockies also dropped that series to the Nationals. So 3 straight series losses for the Rocks. They're going on the road after being held to 1 run with only a couple of hits yesterday. It could be a good turnaround and bounce back day for the Rocks tomorrow. I'm just not going to be too confident in it, but Rockies certainly are have a chance to win this series ahead. The biggest issues when that on the road to 100 losses still is the Brewers, Dodgers, Diamondbacks, Rays, Orioles, and then you finish the series against the Braves. Dropping the series against the Nationals and the A's, it doesn't do you any favor. So in reality, is that a big deal? Do we care that much? No, but we'd like to watch the Rockies win. It's just, woof. This schedule just is brutal for the Rockies. I mean, you really look at it. Rockies could beat the Brewers, sure. I guess they're certainly vulnerable. Dodgers going to LA for a 4-game set is going to be tough. Diamondbacks have proven to be quite the pain for the Rockies this year. August is not going to be kind. August is not going to be a kind month for the Rockies, but it all starts against the Redbirds tomorrow. Old friend Nolan Arenado over there, who did not get traded to the Dodgers, thank God. I don't know how you guys would have felt, but for me, that one would have been a big time bummer. That would have just been an absolute disappointment. Wouldn't even be doesn't even come close to where I would the words I would use to describe that. But Cardinals did beat the Rockies 2 out of 3 games there in their series at Coors Field. Rockies are going to hope that they can get more from Chris Flexen tomorrow, who, woof, that was not good from him in his Rockies debut there as he made it 3 2/3, giving up 4 hits, 6 runs, 5 of them earned, 2 home runs, 6 walks, and 4 strikeouts in that 11-3 loss against the Oakland Athletics. Yes, that's the other important thing to mention there. The A's doing that damage to Flexen. So if the A's can do that damage to Flexen, the Cardinals certainly can as well. They got power in that lineup. Absolutely. We'll see how it goes here. The Rockies 17-36 on the road. So it's definitely been tough goings yet again for the road Rockies. Folks, we'll be breaking it all down. We'll be looking ahead. We'll be talking more baseball, Rockies baseball, right here on the Locked On Rockies podcast here on your favorite streaming service and on the SiriusXM app. But, of course, you can also find us on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. Hang out with us there and let us know your takes. Are you happy with the Bill Schmidt tenure so far, or do you want to see more from the Rockies GM? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Go check out the Locked On Nuggets, Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Broncos, and Locked On Buffs podcast for your second listen of the day. Until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.